Welcome to part 3 of a 3-part series looking at a small community in west central Wisconsin, a community called Boyceville. It's in Dunn County, Wisconsin. This episode we're going to be speaking with Sheriff Kevin Bygd. The first 2 episodes were looking at the community. We spoke with longtime resident and barber Dale Bird. That was in the first episode. Second episode was speaking with Robbie Rickenberg, looking at his business, and then also some really neat things that he's doing to help people that are amputees, an organization called Wiggle Your Toes. He's the one that also helped pull this together. Now this episode, we're going to be speaking with, as I said, Sheriff Kevin Bygd, and getting some really cool insight from a sheriff that has also was elected and served as the Wisconsin Sheriffs and Deputy Sheriffs Association president. So he's got a lot of very good insight. I just really appreciate him taking the time to talk with us, share with you guys what he's seeing. And there's some issues that we talk through. It's interesting to see. There's a channel, Pete Santinello's been talking with sheriffs along the southern border in Arizona and Texas about what they're seeing with the migrant problem or the circumstances on the border, we'll say. Got to speak with Sheriff Kevin Bygd about how that is impacting a community so far away from the border in Wisconsin. You can't get a whole lot farther away from the southern border. He's got some insights and some thoughts on that. I'm going to just let the interview speak for itself. I'm learning as an interviewer, so I appreciate you guys watching this. I appreciate the sheriff taking the time to go through this with me. He just has a lot of really good information, some good insight, so I hope you appreciate and enjoy this interview. So we just wrapped up a good lunch at Buckshot's Bar, and now we're going to be heading out with Sheriff Bygd. Did I pronounce that right? Bygd. He's going to show us around town, and we're going to get some of his perspective on what's going on in small town America in Dunn County, Wisconsin here. But then also, I'll take the opportunity to learn a little bit more about the role of sheriff, because I think it's one of those that is not understood enough. So let's go ahead and get going.
Sounds good.
All right. Oh, definitely thank you for this opportunity. This is gonna be fun. All right, so we're in with Sheriff Bygd, and we're just gonna be driving around town a little bit and getting perspective on what he's been seeing and his role as sheriff. So you've been sheriff now for
just starting my 5th year.
5th year for Dunn County, Wisconsin.
Correct.
Okay. And what would you say the biggest trends you're seeing, not only in Boyceville area, but in Dunn County in general?
You know, I've been in law enforcement here in Dunn County for over 30 years. So I've seen a cultural change, some of the same problems from year to year, continue, but added new kind of twists and turns with the methamphetamine problem that we have in Dunn County. They've added a new dynamic to the culture that we're dealing with, and it's, you know, the drug world, the illegal substance abuse leads to more property crimes such as burglaries and thefts, and you know, they go hand in hand. That I would say probably 95% of our property crimes are connected to drug-related activity. Either, you know, stealing things out of homes or off properties to try and sell for to obtain more drugs. So,
well, I probably didn't set you up with the best starting question there, but yeah, I'd say that's something we definitely want want to talk through. I kind of gave you a pretty vague starting question. You had said you've been sheriff now for 5 years. You also mentioned that you've been in law enforcement for 30. What brought you into becoming the sheriff?
Well, I started with the sheriff's office when I was 19 years old. I started off as a jailer dispatcher. Worked in that capacity for 5 years before I went to patrol when I was 24. Worked as a patrol officer, a patrol deputy for the sheriff's office for 8-9 years. Took a specialized position with in civil process, where I handled all the evictions and vehicle repos and served civil process. I did that for 3.5 years before I was promoted to a patrol sergeant position, and I was a patrol sergeant for 8 or 9 years before the opportunity came open for the captain of field services, which I was promoted to in 2013, and I was the captain of field services, running our patrol division, investigations divisions for about 6 years. And the opportunity came up that the current sheriff was retiring, and the timing was right for me to run. And I ran for sheriff in 2018, was elected, and started my term in 2019. So it'll be 34 years in law enforcement with the sheriff's office throughout my career, and just kind of been with the sheriff's office my entire life, my entire adult life, I should say.
So you hit on something important there, I think, in the evolution of your career, becoming elected. That's one thing that's very unique about the position of sheriff, is it's the only elected position in law enforcement, which I think is underappreciated and misunderstood in general society. Can you tell us a little bit about the role of the sheriff, and why is the sheriff so important, especially when you talk about constitutionality? You know, it's the only law enforcement position that's in the Constitution, if I've got that right.
Yeah, no, you're right, and you're elected to the office of sheriff by the voters of your county. They trust you to protect their rights and take care of the community, and it's unique. I'm not hired by a county board. I'm not hired by a village board, a city council. The voters choose who they want to represent their law enforcement throughout their county. So, some people will say it's a popularity contest, or it does come down to, with any kind of elected position, is qualifications, and it starts with being part of the community that you live in, and people want to know the sheriff, and they want to elect somebody that they know and they trust. And that differs from, a police chief, that they're hired by a city council, they're hired by a village board to do their police work in their community, but they really don't answer to the electors of the county or the village or city that they represent. So you're held, as an elected sheriff, you're held accountable by the people that put you in office and that elected you to office. So I can say, in Dunn County, I've got 45,000 bosses, because I answer to everybody that I represent.
That's a critical difference. That's the accountability is at a different level with the sheriff department versus a typical police department. With that different, how do you manage that relationship between local police departments and the sheriff department?
Well, they don't, the local municipality police departments don't answer to me. They answer to their local body of government, whether it's a city or a village or a township. May have a constable in some cases. But I'm the chief law enforcement officer of the county, but that doesn't mean that police chiefs or any police departments answer to me. We try not to step on toes and take over investigations on them. That's kind of they're the primary agency for their municipality. We'll certainly assist them, but it's a delicate balance sometimes. I'll take calls from citizens occasionally that are not happy with their local police department, and I have to, let them know that I don't oversee them. Their village or city board does, and that if they have a problem with the chief of that municipality, they have to take it up with that municipality of itself. I don't have any oversight over a police department.
Would there be ever a situation where a sheriff would step in a situation like that?
Well, certainly if we felt that there was, they were over their head on an investigation, you try and breach that with offering assistance first. I think if it came to the point that it was derelict duties or something along that lines, we would certainly have to step in and take over a criminal investigation, or but we try and handle that delicately.
Well, I suppose you'd have to have some working relationship, because you do maintain and manage the jail facility, the county jail.
That's right.
Is that the only prison facility within Dunn County, or do municipalities have their own jail cells within their departments?
Nope. The Dunn County Jail, which is part of my office, is the only detention facility in Dunn County. Larger municipalities, say in Milwaukee, probably have their own short-term detention facilities, but in Dunn County, no, the Dunn County Jail is the only detention facility here in the county.
Okay. So now, you had mentioned Milwaukee, which brought to mind Sheriff Clark. Now, there's a couple of different sheriffs that have become household names in the last few years. Sheriff Arpaio, Sheriff Mack, Sheriff Clark of Milwaukee. Some of that pertaining to border issues, some of that pertaining to the handling of not only with the border, but then drug issues. Let's talk a little bit about the border, especially as we're looking at what Rob's got going on here in hiring a lot of Latino employees. What does that dichotomy look like for you, having a growing Latino population at the same time that people are really concerned about the border and the drugs? Are they two completely different issues, or do they flow together at all?
Well, they can certainly flow together, but the people that are coming here to work are not typically the ones that are smuggling drugs across the border. I think that's where they separate.
Okay.
However they're coming into the United States, in a lot of cases, not legally, they're coming here for different purposes. There's certainly a lot of them that are connected to criminal behavior, but there's a lot of very productive, Hispanic population that come to the U.S. to work that don't cause us a lot of problems.
Is the border issue, put it this way, is the border issue reaching Dunn County?
Oh, it certainly is, and I think the influx of illegal drugs,
okay,
fentanyl, opioids, other opioids, I should say, and methamphetamines, the ease of access. Under different administration, I don't want to get political, but meth was tough to get, and it cost you $120 for a certain amount of methamphetamines, and now the ease of access is down to $20-30, because there's so much of it. It's so prevalent that people don't have a hard time getting their hands on it. And
so the average citizen doesn't. You hear about it in the news, but we just don't really understand how significant that issue is.
Right.
Okay.
And that's the reality of what we do in law enforcement is we deal with, the 10% of the population that most of society doesn't see, doesn't necessarily know what we do. And the same thing with illegal substances, that we're dealing with this stuff on a daily basis, kind of behind the scenes of the community. You know, they may hear about it, they may see about it, see it in the news if there's a large drug arrest in their community, you know, and we notify the media of that, or the media catches wind of it. We certainly don't hide anything from them, but it's almost become not even newsworthy anymore when a large quantity of methamphetamines is seized. It's so commonplace now that the media doesn't necessarily even pick up on the stories.
So what would be the time frame that you've seen probably the biggest shift in that? Would it be somewhat of the response to COVID? Is it the administration? Is it like, you know, you've been in law enforcement 34 years, correct?
Yep.
And sheriff is 5. So in that time frame, where would you say that you've seen the biggest shift in some of that, the influx of drug problem?
It's really, well, the influx of drugs, probably in the last 10 years, and there's a couple different factors in that. The lockdown on Sudafed, so people had a harder time getting their hands on what, you know, the main product of methamphetamines is. And controlling that, having to identify yourself when you go to a pharmacy to get nasal decongestants.
Yeah.
You know, years ago, we were the number 2 county in the state for a number of meth labs seized or discovered, or arrests made from. Only second to St. Croix County, which is a neighboring county.
Was that in this Boyceville area, or what part of the county was that?
There was a lot of them in the Boyceville area. There was, you know, south of Menominee. They're kind of all over, but there really seemed to be a large portion in this northwest corner of Dunn County. 2 blocks from where we're driving right now, we had a complete meth lab stuffed underneath a trailer house, and had to call in, you know, hazmat team to clean up that disaster, really, because it was full of chemicals and dangerous compounds that could have poisoned children and the entire community if it got into the groundwater. So, you know, it's, in one way, you know, people aren't cooking meth and dumping chemicals all over our community anymore, but it's because they don't need to, because they can buy meth so easily that they don't need to try and they don't take the chance of getting caught cooking.
So would you say it's a shift in just the availability, or were there actions that the department was able to take, or was it a combination?
Well, we've been battling it for years. You know, making arrests, and you know, we're seeing a cultural change even within law enforcement now, that there's more of a focus on treatment, trying to almost force people into treatment to try and curb the problem a little bit.
More treatment over prison?
More treatment over prison has been a big focus probably the last 8 years here locally.
Would you say that's helped?
It's had some impact.
Okay.
To what extent? You know, sometimes immeasurable. You know, there's certainly some success stories of, you know, people that have kicked it and moved on and have become productive members of society. And there's the same people that, you know, it's their culture, and it's almost like they pass it on to their kids, that they're, you know, they're drug dependent, and their family can't even seem to move on from it. So.
Okay, so it's become a fabric of society in a sense.
It is. You know, it's if you grow up in the culture, you know, and you can link it to poverty, you can link it to whatever it is. Methamphetamines is, you know, used by a wide variety of society.
Mm-hmm.
but certainly more poverty-stricken areas, lower income, less productive members of society, whether it's because of drug use or that's the culture they grew up in and they've never really had a job or cared to, so we've seen anywhere from local business owners being caught dealing methamphetamines and losing their businesses and their way of life because they got wrapped up into it.
Yeah, it's everywhere you go. It seems to be a pretty ingrained, growing problem. Now, getting back to, I want to get back a little bit more into sheriff, but I want to ask this question first. What is it that you have seen, or have you seen any cultural shifts in the, we'll say more specific to this part of the county, Dunn, as we talked with Rob, and bringing in a little bit different dynamic as far as a larger Latino population? Has it been a positive? Has it impacted society? It doesn't seem like anybody I've talked to so far seems to think it's been a plus for the community. What would your perspective be?
Yeah, certainly they don't. I would say they serve a valuable purpose here of coming and working and spending their money locally and things like that. From a law enforcement standpoint, a lot of times the biggest trouble we have involves alcohol with that community, some impaired driving, some crashes and things like that. But for the most part, they're not a tax on law enforcement services.
Okay.
Because they get up and they go to work every day, and they may go home and drink their beer as long as they stay home and drink their beer, or go to the local establishment and walk home, whatever that may be. They're not a big tax on the local law enforcement need.
So it basically comes down, doesn't matter where, doesn't seem to be an issue where people are from, is the fact that they're misusing certain chemicals.
Well, yeah.
Basically it comes down to?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
That's the biggest thing we see in law enforcement, is cause of the root problems is alcohol abuse, drug abuse, mental health. People that get up and go to work every day and send their kids off to school and make sure their kids come home from school and are behaving themselves aren't a burden on law enforcement and the taxpayers to support what we have to do in the community.
Well, and didn't you also mention that, I think it was earlier we were talking about 95% of the people that are in your prison system right now it's somewhat related to either drugs or alcohol?
Yeah, we can connect, their substance abuse, whether it's alcohol or drugs, meth, opioids, whatever it is, to some substance abuse. And to go hand in hand with that, mental illness.
Yeah. That seems to be, it's a curious one to see the growth in that. How about, a lot of people are tying some of the mental health issues to the response to what took place in the last 2 years with lockdowns and some of the mandates that came down. What would you say, did you see a lot of impact here? What was your role in sheriff with a lot of the, I'd say, confusion that was going on with that, people not sure what to do, who was in charge, what rules they had to follow? And I think the role of the sheriff seemed to really elevate and come to people's mind as far as kind of that constitutional helper.
Yeah, and that's what probably most of society doesn't realize, is the sheriff of your county really is the one that protects your constitutional rights and stands up for your constitutional rights. And in the same breath, really, law enforcement are the only ones that have the authority to take those constitutional rights away from you for a just cause, for violating a crime. There was certainly I don't want to say political stand, but a common sense stand by a lot of sheriffs across the state and across the nation of what were perceived as unconstitutional health emergencies. I'll give you one example. The governor of our fine state put out in part of his health orders that people couldn't, or the golf courses couldn't be open. So I got questions from our local golf courses that they had members that would show up and just walk their courses and golf their courses, even though the clubhouse wasn't open. They weren't selling them anything. They weren't, charging them anything. They already had a membership for the season, and they were simply walking the golf course for exercise. They loved the game and wanted something to do during lockdowns.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot else going on.
Right. So I quickly became the sheriff across the state and nationally as the sheriff that allowed golf courses to open, which wasn't in fact true. Golf courses were closed. The clubhouses weren't open for business. They weren't selling food product, selling drinks. They were simply allowing their members to walk their courses and golf their courses. And in the governor's orders says we encourage you to go enjoy our public parks and our state parks and our county parks and go bicycling, go for a walk. But now you can't do that on private property with a golf club in your hand? That just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I took a stand against that. I sent a joint letter from our health department and the Menominee police chief, who had a golf course in his community, that this is where we stand on it. We're not going to come out and arrest people for a health order violation because they're walking on your golf course with a club in their hand. It just didn't make sense. But it wasn't a popular decision. I'm sure at the state level they weren't happy with me. But I wasn't going to be that sheriff that was going to take a stand against somebody walking on private property with a golf club in their hand hitting a little white ball.
What was the community response?
Oh, well supported.
Okay.
I
would assume so.
Yeah, it was well supported by the community. I didn't hear any negative feedback locally. And surprisingly, I got a lot of negative feedback from other sheriffs because they got heat, in their communities. And I completely understand that now they're getting calls from their golf courses and saying, hey, why can't our members walk our course and use our facilities? And
right.
It put them in a difficult position. It kind of opened my eyes to what one sheriff does in one county can certainly impact, what another sheriff has to deal with in a neighboring county or across the state. But so it was a challenge for us all at that time. But I took a stand that I certainly wasn't going to enforce any safer at home health regulations saying you couldn't walk on private property with a golf club in your hand.
Right. What would you say, like, if we were to look forward, kind of wrap up the role of the sheriff? Certainly appreciate taking the time to. I didn't get as much footage looking around. I can't get the camera turned around, but appreciate your insight and sharing a little bit more about the role of the sheriff from as we're moving forward and times are getting they don't seem to be getting less weird.
Right.
What would you want people to know about the sheriff in their community? How can they leverage them? What is the role looking forward? What is the biggest thing that people should, from a takeaway that people should have about their sheriff?
Well, the sheriff's here to serve the community, and most sheriffs are elected to the position because they care about their community. It's and that's the difference between a sheriff and a police chief. A lot of police chiefs don't even live in the communities that they serve. One of the things that I require as my deputies is you must live in the county. Even state law says you don't have to. I want my deputies living in their community because I want them to be part of the community that they serve. I don't want them living in a neighboring county and coaching their kids' little league team in a different county in the community they serve doesn't know who they are. There's certainly public trust with the sheriff. You need to be able to know, you want to know your sheriff, and you need to know that you can trust him. And part of that stems from being part of the community that you serve. Coaching your kids' softball team, or being a Cub Scout leader, or whatever that is. People want to have a public trust in law enforcement. And I guess I feel that support from this community, from Dunn County as a whole, that I put myself out there. I don't, I attend meetings when asked to, come and talk, and they can throw questions at me. I'm kind of an open book. I don't pull any punches. I try and be as transparent with the community as I possibly can, and they appreciate that.
Well, I can kind of vouch for that, because as we're driving around, what you can't see on the camera, unfortunately, is the response as we've been driving around, how many people smile and wave. So that's definitely a good indication that you have a good rapport with your community. So as an outsider, I got to say that's kind of neat to see.
Yeah, it's especially the Boyceville area. I'm pretty well known here. I'm part of the community. Mm-hmm. I've coached softball in this community for over 10 years. Anybody that's had a daughter that's gone through softball in the last pretty much 10 years knows me very well.
Do they call you sheriff, or do they call you coach?
Well, the girls usually call me coach or call me Kevin.
Okay.
My friends in the local community rarely call me sheriff, and I'm perfectly fine with that. My name's Kevin, and I want to be Kevin to them. My employees, out of respect, a lot of them call me sheriff, but I'm perfectly fine being called Kevin, because it's the name I was given, and I certainly respect the title and the position. But my friends in this community call me Kevin, Kevy, Bygdsy. I get all kinds of nicknames, and I'm good with that, because they know me, they trust me, and they're friends with me.
Right.
So.
Well, that's great. Appreciate it. Any final words?
Not that I can think of.
All right. Well, that does it for this episode. Hope you guys have enjoyed and appreciated a look around the community of Boyceville. Have enjoyed the conversation that we had with Dale and with Robbie and with the sheriff. There's going to be more stuff coming. Please share what you'd like to see in the comments. If there's room for me to grow as an interviewer, and as this channel grows, I want it to be more of what you guys want to see, what's interesting for you. Like I said, I've got some more stuff coming up. I'm going to be on the road a little bit, so it'll be spreading out across the country some. So share what you'd like to see. If you're liking this and enjoying it, please share the channel, like it, subscribe it, that whole thing, and we'll see you next time.